got a video call of you apologizing.
The feud that had hip-hop glued to every headline, every social media post, every subtle diss, from subliminal lines to Beyoncé's mother drama, suddenly came to a jaw-dropping halt when T.I. and his son King Harris went live and apologized. But the real shock isn't the apology itself. It's why they chose that moment. You have to understand the fire that led here. Curtis, 50 Cent, Jackson and Clifford T. Harris didn't collide overnight. Their tension stretches back to the late 2000s, when both men sat at the pinnacle of the culture. 50 Cent, the G-Unit general who survived 9 bullets, ruled New York with an unshakable swagger. T.I. claimed the South with a confidence that bordered on audacious self-belief. 2 kings, 1 game. And in hip-hop, that proximity to the throne almost always sparks friction. Early shots were subtle, a lyric here, a glance there, decoded only by the initiated. But 2007 changed everything. T.I. was arrested on federal weapons charges, machine guns, silencers, prior felony, with sentences that could have meant a decade in prison. He ultimately pleaded guilty and received 1 year and 1 day, a number that some in the culture felt didn't fit the crime, and 50 Cent never let it go. By 2008, he released "You So Tough," a lyric aimed like a hammer, sending the message that this rivalry wasn't casual. It was personal, deep, and destined to shape a generation of hip-hop. Understanding that context is crucial, because without it, the apology means nothing. With it, it becomes seismic.
I got the best lawyers money can buy. They said it would've got me 10 or maybe 9. I said, well, how do you explain how homie breathes? Said to keep your mouth shut or you eat the cheese. You so tough.
When people pressed 50 Cent about whether his line was aimed at T.I., he did what he always does. He hovered in the gray zone, masterfully evasive. He framed it as art, claiming that real-life events feed entertaining music, and insisted that if he had a real problem with any artist, that person would know directly. But when pushed further, he dropped a line that was both telling and calculated. The accusation was there, but the confession never came. Psychologically, this was classic 50, controlling the narrative without exposing himself fully, letting the culture digest the ambiguity while he watched from the sidelines with a smirk. That's what makes him dangerous in these battles. He doesn't just fight. He engineers perception, keeping fans and rivals guessing while the tension simmers. T.I., on the other hand, has always denied that his lighter sentence had anything to do with cooperating with authorities. He framed his plea as a calculated move to protect his family, grounded in grief for his friend Phil Ant Johnson, murdered in 2006. But in hip-hop, context is often ignored when a good story exists, and 50 Cent had a story to tell. For years, this simmering tension hovered just below the surface, moments of mutual respect punctuated by unspoken resentment, waiting for a spark big enough to ignite the next chapter of one of hip-hop's most volatile rivalries.
Is that line about T.I.?
Absolutely for the public to decide.
T.I. has always maintained that his lighter sentence had nothing to do with cooperating with authorities, that his plea was strategic, aimed at protecting his family and managing a personal tragedy, not betraying anyone else. He has repeatedly pointed to his actions after the 2006 murder of his friend and assistant Phil Ant Johnson as proof. The Crime Stoppers ad, the public outreach, everything he did was about seeking justice for a loved one, not giving up strangers. At a human level, that grief resonates because it's raw, tangible, and deeply personal, something 50 Cent could never fully weaponize without inviting scrutiny. Yet in hip-hop, context is often the first casualty of a good story, and 50 Cent had one. 4 years, the tension between them simmered under the radar. Interviews where both men spoke of mutual respect, T.I. downplaying the friction as rough play, 50 Cent quietly observing, calculating every move. But that calm veneer was deceptive. Psychologically, the culture knows this. Unresolved conflict is never dormant. It waits, it festers, it waits for the perfect spark. That spark came repeatedly in subtle ways. Coded lyrics, public jabs, and small gestures that to outsiders might have seemed meaningless, but to those paying attention were loaded with meaning. T.I. often tried to neutralize the narrative, framing himself as measured, rational, a man who understands the game. Yet even that couldn't erase the shadow of doubt that 50 Cent cast. The real story here isn't just about who said what or who got off lighter in 2007. It's about perception, power, and control. And in the game of hip-hop, the man who controls perception almost always controls the outcome. By understanding this, you see why a single lyric or a seemingly small comment can carry decades of weight, why respect, reputation, and family intersect in ways that turn music feuds into battles that feel existential. Every subtle insult, every cryptic line, every quiet smirk from 50 Cent was a psychological chess move, and for T.I., navigating it required more than pride. It required strategy, patience, and the courage to endure a war of narrative that had already defined how the culture remembered them both.
Me and 50 cool, I'm the only one who's not offended by his brass approach, and he's not offended by mine. So, we play rough, but ain't no issue. It's a mutual respect.
Everything seemed settled. Two grown men navigating the game with unspoken respect. Until 2020, when the killing of King Von outside an Atlanta hookah lounge lit a fuse that had been smoldering for years. T.I. posted a message urging outsiders to settle their disputes elsewhere, but the culture read it as insensitive, and 50 Cent didn't hesitate to respond publicly, warning that words like that could be dangerous. T.I. denied targeting King Von, yet the perception was enough to plant a seed for a new, very public conflict. By February 2026, that seed had grown into something thorny, dragging in people who had never asked to be part of the fight. On the Nightcap podcast, T.I. escalated without subtlety, calling out 50 Cent for dodging a versus battle. No hints, no polite framing, just a direct challenge. The tension was electric. The narrative had shifted. What was once performative competition had become personal, a high-stakes game with reputations, family, and legacy on the line. Psychologically, this resonates because people respond to authenticity, to raw, unfiltered emotion. And T.I.'s decision to speak out publicly signaled that the war was no longer just about music. It was about pride, credibility, and refusing to be controlled by another man's narrative, a spark that would ignite the next, even more explosive chapter of this feud.
I said I wanted 50. That's what I said. He don't want no smoke, though. Oh, Lord! I called my man out. He don't want no smoke. He ducking smoke. It's cool.
50 Cent responded exactly the way he always does. Not with raw rage, not with a direct confrontation, but with precision. He went into the archives, posting court footage, Crime Stoppers videos, captions designed to undermine T.I.'s credibility while keeping himself in complete control. His voice calm, mocking, untouchable. But then, on February 22, 2026, he crossed a line, posting an unflattering photo of Tiny Harris. That single move transformed a rap rivalry into something intensely personal, something that could no longer be contained in music or media soundbites. Suddenly, the feud wasn't just about ego or album sales. It became a matter of family, protection, and raw emotion. King Harris, T.I.'s 21-year-old son, stepped into the fire, not as a calculated strategist, but as a son defending his mother. His words hit with realness you can feel. No PR, no performance, just raw response to disrespect. He referenced 50 Cent's own traumatic past, bringing up the murder of 50's mother and even posting images of her gravesite. Psychologically, this lands because it cuts to the core of human instinct. Protect your family at all costs. The internet erupted. Opinions split. Some argued 50 Cent had brought this on himself by targeting Tiny first. Others insisted King had gone somewhere no one should ever go. Both perspectives had weight, because this moment touched on morality, legacy, and the unwritten rules of hip-hop. But King didn't stop there. He called out 50's reputation, his history of losses, his street credibility, even posting photos of 50's son Sia. Every move strategic, every word emotionally loaded, designed to hit where it mattered most. T.I., far from intervening, stepped forward alongside his son, signaling that this wasn't just a reaction. It was a united front. And then T.I. released The Right One, a diss track that portrayed 50 Cent not as a hip-hop legend, but as a man hiding behind an image, someone who had never truly faced consequences for decades of public battles. Every lyric cut deeper, exposing patterns of behavior, failures in street credibility, and losses that had followed Curtis Jackson for almost 20 years. The cultural and familial stakes were now inseparable. The feud was no longer entertainment. It was a war, and the message was clear. Attack the family, and you awaken forces far more powerful than the original rivalry. Psychologically, this resonates because it's human, real, and unpredictable, and strategically, it's a reminder that in hip-hop and in life, actions have consequences, and some lines, once crossed, can ignite firestorms that no one can fully control.
How y'all bitches raised? I'm not raised like that. I don't go. I'm not going about my mom. I'm not going. So tell your ass mama dig her ass up and post a picture that look better than my mama. Wrong with you? Y'all better tie y'all shoes. Y'all don't know who with. You better put that music up and shut the fuck up, cause all that other shit ain't gonna get on my mother.
By the time King Harris stepped into the fray, the feud had already spiraled far beyond music. 50 Cent's post of an unflattering photo of Tiny Harris didn't just provoke a reaction. It shattered an unspoken code in hip-hop: don't attack family. King, at 21, became the embodiment of that boundary, responding with an intensity that stunned the internet. He didn't hold back. His response invoked the murder of 50 Cent's mother, Sabrina Jackson, a defining trauma that shaped Curtis Jackson from a child into the man the world knows today. He posted images of her grave, symbols of the pain and loss that had long been part of 50's public narrative. Psychologically, this lands because it taps into a universal instinct: protect your family at all costs. It's raw, authentic, and emotionally impossible to ignore. The reaction was immediate and polarized. Half of the culture argued 50 Cent brought it on himself by targeting Tiny first, ignoring her lack of involvement. The other half insisted King had crossed a sacred line, weaponizing personal tragedy in a way that no feud should ever touch. Both perspectives carried real moral weight. This wasn't performative trolling. This was human, familial defense, mixed with the sharp edge of a young man stepping into a war his father had fought for decades. But King Harris didn't stop with a single post. He unleashed a second wave, attacking 50's credibility, his street reputation, and his history of public losses. He referenced moments like the 2007 Kanye West album battle, a shadow that had followed Curtis Jackson for nearly 20 years, as well as playful yet cutting photos of 50 with oversized toys, highlighting vulnerability and the contrast between image and reality. He even brought 50's son Sia into the narrative, making it clear that the conflict now spanned generations. Family versus family, legacy versus legacy. Every post was calculated, emotionally charged, and designed to make the public pay attention. T.I., far from retreating, fully endorsed his son. He publicly praised King as a good man, a strong father, a person of principle. And then T.I. himself entered the battlefield in a way that made the stakes unmistakable. On February 23, he dropped the diss track The Right One, calling out 50 Cent not as a legend of hip-hop, but as a man hiding behind an image, avoiding accountability, and running from competition. The track outlined a history of losses, failed beefs, and unresolved conflicts, reframing 50 Cent not as a king, but as a man whose reputation had outpaced his real consequences. T.I. made it clear this was not a one-off. The war track was a preview of a sustained offensive, a campaign to reclaim narrative and assert control. Suddenly, 50 Cent wasn't just facing T.I.'s response. He was up against a coordinated, multi-layered effort that combined personal stakes, family defense, and cultural authority. The cultural fallout was enormous. Beyoncé's mother, Tina Knowles, quietly stepped in, reposting a video of Tiny Harris with a dignified message of support. This was a silent, powerful gesture of solidarity among women in the public eye, showing that attacks on family members would not go unchallenged. The internet responded in force, with fans praising Tiny and King, while criticizing 50 Cent for crossing a line that many agreed should never have been touched, particularly a child with albinism, who was referenced in one of 50's posts. Social media erupted. X, Instagram, and Twitter were flooded with debates over morality, strategy, and the boundaries of hip-hop beefs. Psychologically, this moment resonates because it blends entertainment with ethics. The culture was forced to confront what is acceptable in public conflict, especially when family is involved. 50 Cent, recognizing the optics, deleted all posts connected to the feud by February 25th. Every caption, every trolling video, every unflattering photo vanished. Some interpreted this as a retreat, others as a calculated pause. Curtis Jackson had spent decades mastering timing, understanding when to strike, when to silence, and when perception itself is more powerful than action. The silence itself became a narrative weapon, a reminder that in battles of influence, sometimes absence is louder than presence. Meanwhile, King Harris continued to assert himself, releasing the diss track Made Man, signaling he would not step aside, that he had inherited not just the fire of his father's legacy but a willingness to fight for family and respect on his own terms. T.I., King, and the family narrative created layers of context that elevated the feud from entertainment into a cultural examination of morality, strategy, and human instinct. Every action, every post, every diss track wasn't just a message to the rival. It was a declaration of values, a statement about what is protected, and a warning about the consequences of crossing personal lines. The anticipation of the unresolved Verzu battle hovered in the background, reminding the public that while the personal stakes had exploded, the original competitive challenge remained unclaimed. In hip-hop, as in life, the one who wants something from another is rarely in control. And that tension drove every move, every post, every track in this escalating drama. Then came the live apology. T.I. and King went on Instagram Live, addressing the culture, the fans, and each other. Their words were calm but firm, carrying the weight of history, the fire of conflict, and the humility that comes from understanding when enough is enough. This wasn't a PR stunt. It was truth-telling in a world of performative feuds. They acknowledged the pain caused, framed the actions within context, and made it clear that while battles may continue in art and music, respect, family, and human decency had to remain untouchable. The culture watched, exhausted yet riveted, as a firestorm that had spanned decades reached a moment of clarity. Psychologically, it resonates because people crave both conflict and resolution. They want the drama, but they also want justice, empathy, and truth. By the end, the lesson was unmistakable. A fire that burns this hot doesn't just consume participants, it reshapes the entire landscape. Respect for family, cultural ethics, and personal legacy became central talking points, and the public's understanding of T.I., King, and even 50 Cent shifted in ways that will linger for years. The apology didn't erase the past, but it reframed it, showing that even in the most heated conflicts, humanity can reclaim the narrative. If this story teaches us anything, it's that in hip-hop, as in life, the intersection of power, family, and public perception is a battlefield. And those who master it, not just with lyrics but with strategy, morality, and instinct, are the ones who truly control the game. And that's where the story gets uncomfortable. Because when fire burns this hot, no one escapes unscathed, and the consequences ripple far beyond the immediate feud, shaping the culture, the narrative, and the generations that follow.